A Saudi Arabian royal family living in Falls Church, Virginia, is being accused of forcing a woman into slavery. The lawsuit says the woman worked more than 15 hours a day. She wasn't allowed to leave the royal family's home without supervision, and she was repeatedly called a whore, a donkey, colored, and garbage. So she's initiated this lawsuit, and she's got some real precedent for this. First of all, here's the problem that they've been seeing in these royal family or royal diplomat kind of cases, is the immunity, that they have diplomatic immunity. Now, the good news is in the UK, the Supreme Court in the UK said, we don't care about diplomatic immunity on this where it comes to these civil kinds of issues, especially where it comes to something that they almost characterized as slavery. This woman was being held there in the UK the same way that this woman was held. But she was Filipino, and the Supreme Court went a long way to say, you know what, we're going to find a way around this, and they did. What is your take on this case? And I guess what bothers me most about it is the times we've given the Saudis so many breaks. I mean, really, Peter, they killed 3,000 people. Their money financed the group that killed 3,000 Americans on American soil. So what do? We help them get out of the country. Remember this whole story? They sneak out of the country. Nobody can find out where they are. The whole royal family is moved back home with the CIA after we know or are pretty darn sure that the money, the financing actually came from Saudi Arabia. We got to do something about having...
It's an easy answer, really. I mean, if you have a U.S. citizen or somebody that resides in the U.S., even if it's on a work visa versus diplomatic immunity, you weigh that out. Which one of those deserves protection? There is absolutely no way we can say that that diplomatic immunity applies to an override,
act of slavery,
an act of slavery.
That
should seem like...
Okay, so that's the narrow exception at this point. Right. At least in the UK, they said, we're going to make some exceptions, and this exception seems to be, they granted limited residential immunity. That's what they call it. They said, you got residential immunity, but it's limited.
Right.
And the thing that they carved out that's very obvious here is they carved out where, where it comes to slavery, we're not going to really give you any kind of breaks. But this one in the U.S., this is going to be a good test. I mean, here's a woman, she was basically held as a slave. And so she's brought the lawsuit against the Saudi royal family. There hasn't, matter of fact, before an investigation could even take place, it seemed like they were moved by the government, moved them somewhere else. Mm-hmm. It's this relationship with Saudi Arabia that we have to make inroads to. Our law firm obviously is bringing a lawsuit against the banks that washed money for terrorists. And that the right to be able to bring those types of cases only came after Congress said, you know what, we're kind of pushing this a little far. Yes, we have this relationship with Saudi Arabia. They have money invested in the United States. We get petroleum, fossil fuel products from them. But we're going to have to start taking a real look when we know that Saudi Arabia financed the money that killed 3,000 Americans in this country. And the families have brought lawsuits. They should be able to make a claim to that money, and that's what Congress did. Congress said, "Yeah,
you don't get special protections because you're with you're from Saudi Arabia or diplomatic immunity." But quite frankly, it shouldn't matter where you're from. At the end of the day, we have to protect basic human rights. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is.
But from a legal from a pure legal standpoint, sure, as we're analyzing this as a legal show, the only way it's going to take place is in little cuts, right, little steps, like the UK said.
Just one little step at a time, like a sandbars built.
Exactly. So the UK said our first little step is to say, we're not granting unlimited immunity in a residential, in a limited residential situation, right, and we're also factoring in that this is nothing short of slavery. So we're cutting some things out. They looked at the fact that in the UK there were 17,000 domestic workers. These complaints are coming up regularly where it comes to these folks working for Saudi families. So this wasn't just a unique one-off kind of case. This Filipino woman in the UK, this wasn't one-off. Same way in the United States.
Right.
This is not a unique situation, and we need to start considering. If you can't embrace the entire thing, you start with exceptions, right, and you start saying, well, there's some very suspect classifications that we need to look at as we monitor this. One is suspect classification is, was slavery? Can we characterize, was slavery involved? The other suspect classification that Congress already gave us is, was terrorism involved? Can we characterize the conduct as terrorism? So we need to keep chipping away at this type of immunity because it is a disaster. And look, these folks think that they're just above the law. I mean, you know, can you imagine telling this woman that she's a whore, she's colored, garbage, and she's held in this home right there in church, in Falls Church, Virginia, where she can't even leave the house. Let's hope. Let's keep up with this one. I want to know where this goes because it has other ramifications besides just this one case.